Okay then, so I guess as we have hit that 2 p.m. mark, then we're going to kick off now. So firstly and most importantly, I just want to say a really big thank you for you all joining today. I think it's really impressive that you students are kind of using your time at the moment, particularly when you have a bit more time when you're at home, in order to find out a little bit more about the world of work, and some really interesting topics about kind of employability in the future. So the fact that you're using this time not only kind of outside of school time, but in your Easter holiday when you're at home, that's absolutely brilliant to show kind of that enthusiasm and the fact that you are using this time to your benefit and making sure that you're taking advantage of the fact that you have a bit of extra time to use these opportunities to learn a little bit more about brands, but also about those kind of employability skills which you'll be needing in the future. So well done for joining now. That's very impressive. And I hope everyone has had a lovely kind of bank holiday long weekend. So thanks and well done, students, particularly from me. I know lots of you might have seen my face before if you've been on our daily webinars over the past few weeks, and beyond that. But firstly, my name's Ellie from Pathway CTM, if you didn't know that. And today we are lucky enough to be joined by a couple of members from the cancer research team who will be introducing themselves a little bit later. But the main focus of today's session is a diversity in the workplace, which is a really important topic. And I'm so glad that we are doing this today. That's absolutely brilliant. So in order to kind of kick off, it's just a little bit of a reminder from a Pathway CTM perspective that we do have these sessions going on daily, and we are lucky enough to be joined by lots of employer guests, and I'm really kind of excited by the guests that we've got on the line today. But we're here to help support you, and throughout the whole process today and beyond, then we're here to kind of feed into that and help support you throughout these kind of strange times. And we are here to help follow up with any of those queries you might have. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how you can do that at the end of today. In terms of the session today, then we will be kind of talking about diversity in the workplace, as mentioned, and we'll be talking to a couple of special guests about their experiences and their kind of expertise in the area. And I'm really excited about the session. And what I'm really going to do is ask for a lot of audience participation. So well done for joining, and I think that you can get a lot out of today's session. So I'd really, really encourage you to use the time to interact with us in this virtual forum, and ask as many questions as possible. So here on your screen, if you're dialed in through kind of like a laptop or a computer at home, you should be able to see firstly me on the right hand side, but also you should be able to see this screen in front of you. And if you're dialed in through Zoom, there are a number of different kind of options in terms of how you can interact with us through the Zoom function. So I want to talk you through those really quickly, just to make sure you get the most out of today's session. So in terms of how you can ask us questions, there is the Q&A box. So if you have any specific questions to myself or any other members of the kind of webinar today, then go ahead and ask them in the Q&A box. And I'd really encourage you to use that at any point during the webinar today. So you know, our guest speakers might be talking, and don't worry about interrupting them, because I'll be managing those kind of questions coming through. So at any point you have any question, all questions are relevant, and I really, really encourage you to ask them throughout. Also, you'll be able to see there is a chat box. So all of you who are dialed in through your laptop, I will kind of be asking a couple of questions at the beginning here. So really kind of get ready to type in some answers to the questions that I ask. So don't hesitate. The chat box is there for you to use as well. So definitely go ahead and do that. If you are dialed in on your phone, which I can see a few people are, then that's absolutely fine too. So you might not be able to use the Q&A function or the Zoom chat, but you can go ahead and email into our student at Pathway CTM kind of inbox and just mention the fact that you're on the webinar and your name and any questions you might have, and I'll be able to pick those up too. So those are kind of your main ways of asking questions today. So that's really kind of the logistics and how that's going to work. But if any of you do have questions around the practicalities and things, then go ahead and ask the questions in the Q&A box like I just suggested. So what I'm going to do then is actually I've kind of spoken about who I am, who a few of you probably already know, and about how you can ask those questions and how you can get the most out of the session. What I'm going to do now is hand over to our special guests who we're lucky enough to have on the call today for the webinar. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in terms of kind of name and also in terms of what their role is at the moment. And then I'm going to bring it back to this, what do we want to get out of today's session? So would that be okay if then I hand over to our panelists in order to introduce yourselves, who you are and what you do, just briefly? Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Thanks for the introduction, Ellie. Nice to meet everybody, kind of virtually. My name's Caroline. I work for Cancer Research UK. I've worked for the charity for 2.5 years now. I went straight there from university, and I'm currently working as a learning and development specialist. So the best way to explain that is I support all our brilliant fundraisers in the charity to basically and hopefully just get a bit better at their job so that they're bringing in as much money as possible for our cause, which is to beat cancer sooner. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I'll pass over to Maheen now.
Hi, I'm Maheen. So I also work at Cancer Research UK, and I'm actually the diversity and inclusion advisor there. So diversity is my full-time job. I'm not going to tell you exactly how I got here because we're going to cover that later in the presentation. So I'm going to hand over back to Ellie.
Brilliant, that's absolutely perfect summary. And I thought it's really nice because in this kind of virtual environment, I know that we're all adapting to that at home. So and I know lots of you students have been telling us how your experiences are going with that. But I think it's really nice to recognise the voices of who's going to be talking today. Because those of you who are dialed in on your phone, now you basically know from our voices who's talking, which makes it a little bit easier. And don't worry, I'll make sure to kind of address any questions to a specific person, just to avoid that confusion which you can get virtually, which is really brilliant for overcoming those barriers at the moment. So moving on to what do we want to get from today. In terms of a summary, then last week we had a kick-off in terms of our series of webinars with Cancer Research, which was absolutely brilliant. And I can see some familiar names of students who were on last week, so that's absolutely brilliant. So we're moving on with that series of webinars. And today we're focusing on diversity and what that means really not only as a whole, but to Cancer Research as a company, which we'll be definitely going into more detail about with Maheen and Caroline later in today's session. And you will, as I mentioned just now, have that kind of exclusive opportunity to ask some first-hand questions to people in the organisation. So I'd really use that opportunity to go ahead and ask any questions. So the way that I want to kind of first question for the students really to get you going, get you back after the Easter weekend, is ask that question in terms of what my question is to you, and I really want you to write into the chat box, and don't be afraid, there is no stupid answer to this question, every single answer is valid. So what does diversity mean to you? Quite a hard question, but go ahead and write into the chat box if you have any idea how you'd summarize diversity or what that means to you. So I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to go ahead and write any answers in the chat box. That would be absolutely brilliant. And while those kind of answers are coming through, so go ahead and do that, students who are on the line. So we're already seeing one response. Brilliant, Alicia. Well done. You get a shout out for the first response. Shalom. Great, that's brilliant to see some responses coming back. I'm going to read out a couple, maybe to get the ball rolling in a second, but I'm going to leave a little bit of time. And also maybe from my perspective, so I'm not the expert today and I've got some experts on the line, but maybe just answering that question from my perspective. So I think we've got two brilliant answers there. But if someone asked me what diversity is, it is that kind of openness, appreciation for everyone's differences and their similarities, I guess, and having a space for that at work particularly. So I'm going to read out the couple we've had so far. So Alicia, diversity means no limitations, the ability to have no barriers. Brilliant. Shalom, I would say it's having a good mix of people from many different backgrounds. Destiny, acknowledging and celebrating cultural differences. And then Abby, people coming from different walks of life and accepting it. So that's really good to see some kind of engagements coming through. So many people responding, that's brilliant. Understanding each individual is unique and recognizing, appreciating and using our difference. Great, Faith, that's such a good response. Ryan, appreciating and accepting differences between people's backgrounds and cultures. And I'm really conscious of the fact that, you know, this is a difficult question, so if you don't want to answer it, that's absolutely fine as well. And it reminds me that in the Q&A box, if you do want to ask any questions anonymously, that's completely fine, and we completely understand that, particularly, you know, with these questions. Don't worry if you don't want to answer that. So I think that's a really good kind of place to understand what diversity is and what that means to some of our students. And so what I'm going to do now is just hand over to Maheen. So I know that I'm going to just, with a couple more responses coming through at that stage, then I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to open up our presentation and move over to Maheen, who's going to take the lead now from a cancer research perspective. So there we go, and brilliant kickoff there, really impressed by the students' responses, and so just stay tuned, it's brilliant to see that you're really engaged.
Fab. Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, these are really, really great responses. You basically covered everything that we had put together. So if we move the slide on. Perfect. So we are a really diverse workforce in a sense of we have a number of different roles. So our organisation is more than 4,000 people. So we have shops workers, we have scientists, we have fundraisers, we've got nurses, we've got call centres, you've got people like me who work in head office, and same as Caroline. We've got lawyers, you name it, we've probably got it. But diversity is really important, and diversity is basically about creating a workforce with people from a range of different backgrounds. Now that can apply to anything. That means to do with your cultural background, how old you are, your sexuality, your gender, whether you're a parent, all of those things that basically make us as who we are as people and society as a whole. We basically want to make sure our workforce and the people in our company come from all walks of life, which is exactly what you've all said. So it's amazing that you already know that, because I definitely didn't know that when I was in school, what all of this was about. So what we're doing with diversity is making sure that everyone's given the same opportunity. So let's say you're a working mum, you're going to have the same opportunity to do your job and kind of be flexible around your kids as someone who doesn't have kids. So it's really important that we give everyone the same opportunity to progress and do their job really, really well. The other important thing about diversity is respecting, championing and valuing people's differences. So we know that the really important parts of an organisation, all of those great ideas that we have, come from our differences, come from our different views, and we bring those things with us as people as we move through an organisation. So diversity is really respecting people and allowing them to be their best selves at work. It's about making sure everyone can participate, engage and succeed. So hopefully that all makes sense. So as you're also on it with your answers, we wanted to pose another question. So you sort of told us what diversity is, but now we want to know why you think this is so important. So I'll give you 2 minutes to kind of put some answers in the chat box again as to why you think diversity is so important to companies.
Well, some of the students put in their responses, and I'll answer it as well as a bit of a trigger to some of you, and I'm not going to steal many of your answers, but in terms of why it's important, then I think it's really well summed up there in terms of, from a workforce perspective, getting some different views.
Yeah, exactly. And someone said it enables equal opportunities, which is exactly right. Isabella has said, because it gives everyone a fair opportunity at their job and it also provides a workplace with a wider amount of views. Yeah, perfect. Karishma, really important, clients also is diverse, so you need a diverse workforce in order to meet the needs of the client best. Yes, exactly. So it's not just about workforce, it's about everyone you come into contact with. So us as a charity, that's about supporters, it's about scientists, it's about the public, it's about government, it's about everyone. Shalom, different people's experiences can offer new solutions and innovation. Yep, Beth, to ensure everyone has an equal opportunity and also allows different perspectives. Perfect. Michael, I think that diversity is important as it allows companies to work with various people in consideration to their culture and viewpoints. Yeah, 100%. I'll give it another 10-15 seconds. These are all really, really great ideas. Diversity is important because everyone's experiences and perspectives are subjective and need to be respected, 100%. Faith, productivity as it allows the ability to learn and grow. Fab. So if we move to the next slide, you've basically taken all the points that we had, which is really, really great to see. So what we said is diversity is valuable because it generates a higher revenue. So companies with a bigger, better, diverse workforce make decisions faster, and that basically gives them an advantage over their competitors. So we know that companies with a more diverse leadership team earn more money. It's really simple. Like you've also said, diversity creates more innovation and creativity. We have better employee engagement, so people are happier at work. There's increased productivity. So as we're all bouncing off ideas, we can challenge each other, come up with new ideas and creative solutions. And we're able to build new insight and ability to connect with different audiences. So diversity also gives us a better range of talent. So it means we can attract people from a range of different backgrounds, and they can come and work for us. People who might not necessarily have had the opportunity, people who might not necessarily know about the charity sector, we can recruit that talent, all of these amazing talented people who are basically at the heart of what we do. It also provides insight into our needs. So if you're from an ethnic minority background, let's say, you're going to have insight into those communities and how those communities function, and that's really, really important. So we have an example of this, of some work that we did with our Pride network, so our LGBT network, that we talked about gendered cancers. So they talked about what it would be like to go and get screening if you don't identify as a gender, and because of that insight we were able to create some like bespoke material for people from those communities to make them feel safer and more prepared to go into those situations, but also for doctors to be more compassionate. Another thing that we've done is translate cancer information into different languages. So we know the UK is really multicultural, and one of the really good things that we've done is translate cancer information into different languages. So that includes languages such as Punjabi, Welsh, a range of different languages, so everyone has the same access to cancer information. And that idea wouldn't have come about if we didn't have people from those communities. So yeah, research has also shown that creativity and innovation has a constant way of exposing multiple perspectives is a way of increasing the creativity and innovation, because it exposes individuals to different worldviews, and that's where you get the really creative, innovative ideas. So I'll move on and let you speak to Caroline now, who's going to tell you a bit more about the work that we're doing at Cancer Research UK.
Great, thank you, Maheen. So our journey with diversity and inclusion kind of officially started in 2018. And you can see in front of you, and if you can't, I'll read them out, but we've got kind of 5 key areas that we're working towards. So the first is social mobility. So what we're looking to do, and what is really crucial that we get right, is removing barriers to entry for candidates from lower socioeconomic groups. So if you think about charities, kind of by the nature of them, by the nature of our purpose, we can't typically pay as much as banks, for example. But having said that, we still need a really diverse workforce, and we want people from different backgrounds, kind of regardless of what socio-economic group they come from. So it's really important that we begin to remove those barriers for those candidates to bring that great talent in. So that's the first, social mobility. The second one I'll talk to you about is having a gender balanced workforce. So we want to be an attractive and inclusive place for people to work of all genders, whether they identify with male, female, or other. And if we think about the kind of typical charity landscape, it's often quite an attractive employer for females, and we have quite a heavy kind of female to male ratio, and we'd like to change that. We want to bring more men on board so that we've got that kind of equality in that sense too. So it might not be one that you necessarily think of, and it might not look the same to other industries, but that's certainly the case with charity. So third is ethnic minority staff. So we'd really like to increase the proportion of staff from ethnic minorities across all levels at the charity. As Maheen's touched on already, we know that cancer affects all, kind of no matter where you come from, and we want to make sure that our workforce represents the UK much better. So the fourth one I'll tell you about is accessibility. So we want to support and remove barriers to entry for people with long-term health conditions and disabilities. That's not just for our workforce, but it's also for our supporters too. So thinking about events like our Race for Life event, our website, if you want to access our website to read some of our cancer information or perhaps visit our online shops, we'd really like to improve the accessibility of that for all people, so that everybody in the public can kind of gain access to us. And the fifth one is around inclusive culture. So we're looking to create an inclusive culture where everyone can be themselves and reach their full potential. So I guess one thing to call out at that point, like once you've removed barriers for access for different kinds of people, once they're in the organisation, if you've not got a culture that really kind of welcomes them and that where people can really identify and celebrate themselves if they want to, they're not necessarily going to feel like they'd want to stay for a long time. So that culture bit is what we'll talk to you about a little bit more with some of the initiatives that we've done. So just for those of you that are on the phone, if you can't see the slide, the 5 key areas that we're focusing on at the moment are social mobility, gender balanced workforce, ethnic minority staff, accessibility, and an inclusive culture. Cool, thank you. So some of the initiatives that we've got going and that I'll talk to you about a little bit more are on the screen in front of you. The first one is Inclusion Champions, and actually that's why I'm on the call today. So I'm an EDI champion, so that's one of the roles that I do at CRUK, and it's something that I've opted to do outside of my kind of normal job. And the role of an EDI champion is to essentially, I work in HR, and it's my role to really kind of promote the benefits of having an inclusive and diverse workforce. So people within my department will come to me if they've got any issues, if they'd like to speak confidentially, if they've got an idea about something that we could do. So it's like a really exciting role. You get to collaborate with lots of different people and hear about some of the great things that are going on. And I guess on a broader level, and something that I'd really encourage you to do is, and you're doing it already just by being on this call, but as you kind of go through the final years of your education and depending on what you decide to do afterwards, always kind of seek the opportunities out to kind of do something outside of the role that you've been given. I've learned so much from being an EDI champion, and I've met people from across the organisation. I've got involved in projects that I never would have, and I've gained some skills like influencing and having to be a really kind of patient and calm listener that I wouldn't have necessarily done before. So you're doing it already by being on this call, but kind of keep doing those things to really develop skills and knowledge in other areas. We're a huge network of champions at the organisation, and we really kind of help get the momentum going around our EDI strategy. I guess everybody in the business has their own kind of full-time roles, and apart from Maheen and her colleague, it's no one else's 100% role to focus on EDI. So with all the champions dedicating about 20% of their time to it, we can really help make progress quite quickly. So that's one example. So that's the EDI champions. Another initiative we have is reverse mentoring, which is really cool, something I wasn't very familiar with before I joined. And it's essentially, rather than mentoring in the kind of traditional sense that you might know, where somebody like really experienced mentors somebody more junior, so somebody earlier in their career like me. Instead, the person who's early in their career mentors the more experienced person, so they can really help kind of shift their perspective. So for example, our CEO might get mentored by somebody much earlier into their career, and that gives an opportunity to kind of have a conversation around, well, actually, you know, people a bit earlier on might find this really challenging, or my experience in coming into the organisation has been X, Y, and Z, and it kind of breaks a lot of barriers and can bring some really positive responses. So that's one initiative. We also have a number of brilliant networks across the organisation that staff can get involved with, whether or not they identify with that particular characteristic. So Maheen's mentioned a few already, but we've got the Women's Network, the BAME Network, the Age Positive Network, Parents and Carers. There's a couple more that I can't remember off the top of my head. We've got 7 altogether, and they're a great way of meeting like-minded people from across the business, kind of really promoting change and positivity around your particular characteristic or topic, and starting some really good initiatives about that. So that's another one. We do some outreach work, so that's essentially letting the local community into the business and engaging with people, and hoping that we build like a really good impression, and hopefully we can attract some great talent through that way. Some employee, and we also have opportunities for employee network chairs, which Maheen will talk to you about in due course, as she has her own experience there. If we had any questions come in on the chat, I saw a couple of notifications.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of questions come in on the Q&A panel, so well done for asking the questions, students. So they're both from anonymous attendees, which is absolutely fine, like I mentioned earlier. And the first question is, what do you find the best advantages are when hiring with diversity in mind? So that's a brilliant question, and I guess could be asked to either of you, but yeah, Caroline, as you're unmuted, what would you say from that perspective?
So what do you find the best advantages are when hiring with diversity in mind? Brilliant question. To begin with, we actually now train all of our hiring managers, so anybody going to interview on diversity, because I mean, Maheen, you might be better at explaining this, but as humans, we kind of all have a bias that comes into play. So we're training our hiring managers to kind of be aware of that, and to really challenge themselves. And ultimately, and like Maheen's touched on this, but the more diversity we have, the better. Like, quite simply, we will get to beating cancer a lot quicker if we've got different ways of thinking, different backgrounds, different experiences, rather than having the same kind of people all sitting around the table. When you get into that situation, people tend to agree because they've come from the same place and they have the same kind of influences. So yeah, quite simply, it just would make us a far better organisation and be able to reach our cause much quicker.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I think it also extends our reach. So when we hire with diversity in mind, we get a wider pool of people. We get to reach people that wouldn't naturally think about coming into the charity sector, who might not think the charity sector is for them, who are a bit cautious about it. They're not sure what it's about. They might have heard some things and they come in. And when we hire with diversity in mind, it means that we can just kind of look at people for the pure talent they're going to bring. And there's so much talent out there, and talent comes in really different forms. So you might not be the most vocal or the best at project management, but your skill might be communication and data and numbers, and that might be your skill. So when we look at hiring, we have to kind of look at people purely for their talent, and everyone has talent, and it's just about finding what is in it with people that's going to make them tick. And also it creates a really dynamic workplace when you've got so many people with so many different ideas. We get so many new campaigns starting, and we get to reach a much wider audience because people kind of understand us a bit better.
Absolutely. So two really, really good answers there. And I hope whoever asked that question is jotting down those notes, because I think there are some brilliant responses there, and leads on quite nicely to the second question, which has also come in saying, is it easy to train people from different backgrounds? Does it affect the training process? So once you've gone past the hiring and all those positives you've seen there, then when it comes to training, what do you see from a diversity perspective?
Doesn't affect the training at all. Everyone we hire is, like I said, really talented, really successful at what they do, and we've hired them because they are the best person for the job. There's always a bit of a misconception that people will get hired because they're from an ethnic minority background, because they're women, or whatever it is that people think. And I really want to emphasize the point that you are being hired for your talent, because you're good at a job, and they want you in the company because you are going to add value to it. So it doesn't affect the training process. I think what is affected is the hiring process. So we have to train people how to hire fairly, which seems like a bit of a ridiculous concept, but it's basically about breaking patterns. So like Caroline said, we kind of all move towards people we are similar to. So we see it with our friendship groups, with family, even in personal day-to-day life. We all kind of associate and surround ourselves with people we're similar to, and we hire in the same way. So it's really about breaking those patterns and getting people to see different talents and what that looks like, even if it's slightly different to what they thought it would be. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. That does make sense, and a brilliant question. And I think that it's really nice to have that differentiation in terms of hiring and then, you know, training and progressing throughout a company, and showing that, yeah, actually, you know, changes are made at that earlier stage in order for accessibility. Correct me if I'm wrong, as I'm just summarizing the points you've made so far in terms of getting access to the organization, then afterwards remaining in terms of everyone's treated equally once you get to that point. So we've had those couple of questions. I would really encourage everyone to keep asking questions. Those are two brilliant starting questions, and then we'll head back to the presentation, and then as the other questions come through, then we'll ask them. So I'll just keep working through there.
Fab. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me and my journey, and how I became the diversity advisor. So I joined Cancer Research UK 3.5 years ago now. So I was an intern, and then I moved into a business research role, and then I moved into a communications role. And whilst I was doing that, there was a bit of a lack of diversity in our organisation. So I'm from London, and I'm used to being around a really, really multicultural, in a really multicultural environment, and it was less multicultural than what I'm used to. So it's a conversation topic I used to have a lot with friends of mine and colleagues of mine. So whilst I was having these conversations, it seemed like a lot of people were really keen to have these conversations and push this agenda forward. And one of the things that came out of this was the Black, Asian and Minority Ethnic, the BAME network. So the picture on the right is me and my wonderful committee on our launch day. And basically what we did was we rebuilt the network. So Caroline's talked about a bit about what a network is, and it's basically a community that you build in the workplace to raise awareness. But also when you run a committee, you build so many skills. So when I started, it was me and the girl behind me, Dania, who was my counterpart. It was just two of us in the organisation of about 4,000. And within 3 months, we'd managed to get this amazing committee together of 13 people. And these are people from all over the organisation. And through that, we really got to work on our skills of persuading, influencing, working out how to build a strategy, which was something I had never done, working out how to communicate and get people along for a cause, so essentially becoming semi-activists in the organisation. But it also gave us a lot of opportunities. So we got to work with senior leadership quite closely. We got to learn from one another. So Dania worked in the web team, and she was able to help us build our internal platform. We had board members come to us to ask us what they could do to participate, what they could do to help. So we were giving them guidance and steering them. And through all of that work, I only did it for 9 months, and it was really, really hard work, but it was the best thing I've ever done. And through that, I basically got this job, which is a diversity and inclusion advisor, which is something every company will have. So whether that's a bank, whether that's government, whether that's media, every company will have a diversity advisor. or a diversity manager who's in charge of this stuff for their organisation. And when you join the network, you build some really tangible skills. So like I said, influencing, persuading, but also working with senior leadership and finding out how they work. You also get to learn what you're good at. So I worked out that I was actually quite good at communication and persuading people, and I wasn't so good at data. So I handed that all over to Dania. But that really set me up and let me know what sort of job I would want to do. So it really tested my skills, and I found it to be a really, really great thing. So these are some pictures from our launch. So we had a number of quizzes, we had food that people had made and that we had bought, and we got more than 100 staff members to come to the launch, which, considering we started with the 2 of us, to get 100 people in 3 months was really, really amazing. So I really enjoyed it. I made some great friends from it too. But more importantly, I built some really, really key skills that I can use in an interview situation. So like I said, every organisation, whatever industry you're going into, will have some sort of diversity manager, and you will have employee networks. So it's sometimes difficult to navigate your way through an organisation to connect with people you're not working with, or to develop new skills and be put on projects that really stretch you. The networks are a really, really good way of doing that. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to share my story. I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything about that.
I had just an initial question. So in terms of kind of practicalities and how you went about that at first, can you like talk us through a little bit about what that campaign kind of looked like, and how you did connect with like ultimately this many people getting together and forming that network? Like, how did that work in terms of actual, you know, step by step from the 2 of you to building that successful network?
Sure. So we started off with this idea that we wanted to build this network. That was the whole idea. So we started really small. So our office was open plan, so we could see and be in the kitchens quite a few times in the day when we were making tea, etc. So one of the things that we did first of all was just talk to people in the kitchens, just random people that we hadn't really met before who we thought could be interested. From then we started to get people who were more and more interested, and we got invited to team meetings, and from team meetings that got escalated up to head level. And when we finally got a sponsor, which was someone who was part of the exec board, that really put us on another platform. So we had whole directorates, which is hundreds and hundreds of people who we could present ideas to and get buy-in from. So that was really exciting to see it build in that way.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. It's such an impressive feat, talking about it going from that size as well to something which you can talk about on a webinar today to all of these students. I think it's so impressive. But we've had another question in which I guess maybe I'm not predicting your answers, but might feed into this. But what's your favourite part of working in a charity and your job specifically? So Maheen, I'll go to you first, and then Caroline will ask the same question after.
Sure, I would still to this day say it was the network, which is what I'm guessing you're envisioning, just because it taught me so much, but also because I am quite a chatty person. I really love talking to people, and this got me in contact with so many people. But through my job now, I also get to advise on campaigns such as media and advertising campaigns. So to better see and better represent diverse communities in our media is so important, so people can see themselves within the charity, and that's really important because we know cancer affects everyone. So whether you're a scientist or a nurse or a cancer patient, you need to be reflected. So that's been a really that's really been my favorite part of this job.
Brilliant. And Caroline, over to you.
So my favourite part of working for a charity, but specifically CRUK, is quite cliche, but it really is the cause. I think, like, I personally get quite a lot from finishing work every day and thinking that though I'm not a scientist, like in some way I'm kind of contributing to trying to beat cancer, and I get to work with some brilliant fundraisers who are out in the community every day, raising money. And yeah, I just really love that element of it. And then I think about my job specifically, so like I mentioned, I'm in learning and development, which is kind of similar to like a training kind of role, and I really love seeing people's confidence kind of grow once I've supported them with hopefully getting better at their job. Yeah, that's always really great. And I think then my confidence grows in turn as I see them feeling a bit braver and better at what they do every day. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Also, that shows like from between the two answers from both of you as well, then it shows like there's little micro things every day from your job, which are the things you love, but then also it's the bigger picture in the macro at the same time, which is really nice. And so just moving on to another question from Alicia. So well done for asking the question, Alicia. How did you get started in the charitable sector? So yeah, both stands for both of you then. Maybe Caroline first this time and then on to Maheen.
Yeah, very good question. So personally, I got started, like I mentioned, I went through the university route, and I decided, well, in my final year, I spent quite a lot of time trying to get a job, probably a bit too much time and less time on my studying, but it was super important to me that I tried to find some employment, and I managed to, I basically looked in the job market at the time, and with graduate trainee schemes you're able to apply early, and I've always been like quite passionate about Cancer Research UK, and they had a HR graduate scheme that linked quite closely with some of my work experience. I'd done some internships, and I'd always kind of worked alongside my studying, and it kind of, I seemed to meet the criteria, so that's kind of how I got started. But like more generally, I think it's quite easy to find volunteering opportunities in the charitable sector, and I'd really encourage people to go and seek those, whether you're interested in like events or research or fundraising, and no matter kind of what cause you're looking at, it doesn't have to be CRUK. I'd really encourage you to seek those. We've also got internships which are paid, which are great. So there are some avenues that you can look into, and yeah, hopefully this has piqued some of your interests.
Yeah, so I also went down the university route, and I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I wanted to work for something that had a good cause, so I just started looking for things quite randomly online. And I think I came across the Cancer Research UK website, and they were hosting internships. So I had a look through, and I was really interested in communications because I did quite a lot of media at uni, and I wanted something that I could do comms with. So I started on the internship program, but I would say also with the staff networks, one of the great things about the staff networks is you get to meet people from a range of other organisations. So we, through the network, have met people from the big consultancy firms, from banks, from various other companies. So that's also a good way to network and find out what jobs are coming up, because networks normally work quite closely together, whether that's the BAME network or Pride network or Women's network. They will often be in contact with other networks, and that's kind of a good way to scout out positions within other companies.
Brilliant. Yeah, so that's some good examples, and I think both points. I just want to mention that we do have another session next Tuesday, which we'll be talking a bit about that kind of volunteering and fundraising element of things. So if you are listening here now and you're thinking, actually, yes, I really want to go down that route, then we can give you a bit more expertise in terms of how you can get there with our next webinar in this webinar series. So great answers, and then that will feed into kind of how you can get involved in that. We've just had another question in for another anonymous attendee, which is great. If an employer asks your sexuality in the diversity part of their application, would they ever take you on just to fill a quota? Should you lie and get the place off your own skill? Interesting question, and I think lightly touched upon earlier, Maheen. But yeah, so I guess I'll just direct that question to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. That is a really great question, and thank you for asking it. And thank you for asking all of your questions, because they've been really good. No, they won't take you on to fill a quota, or you would hope they wouldn't. When you fill out diversity data, it's all anonymous, so very, very few people in the organisation will be able to see that. So if you do tick whatever box you want to tick for your sexuality, your manager, the hiring manager, will not be able to see that. and very few people in the organisation will be able to see that. So it shouldn't affect anything, and you should be hired off your own merit and your own skills. So please don't doubt yourself if you're filling in forms. We've all done it. I've done it personally before, where you start to doubt it, but you have definitely got to where you are because of your skills and your talent. So please don't think otherwise.
Brilliant, and yes, great question, and yeah, definitely don't lie, and that's an important part, I guess, too.
Sorry, just to add, you can always put prefer not to say, so there should always be an option on there to say prefer not to say. So if you're really uncomfortable and you don't want to share it, every form should have a prefer not to say option, so you can always fill that out as well.
Yeah, brilliant point. And so I'm just conscious of time and want to make sure that we keep the questions coming. That's absolutely not me telling you not to ask more questions, and I will ask them if they come through. But just moving on to that final section on the presentation ahead of any last questions coming through.
Yeah, sure. So this last section is on cognitive diversity. So I think we touched upon the different characteristics people hold, but we also wanted to talk about how we all think differently, and that's kind of the crucial part of diversity. So teams with cognitive diversity, so people, we all think differently, and teams with a lot of cognitive diversity are better at problem solving because they all come at the problem from different angles, which is really, really useful. So that's kind of the best thing for a team to be, and that's how all team leaders want their team to be, because otherwise, like Caroline has said, if you have everyone looking at a problem in one way, you won't see the 15 other ways to solve it. So teams of cognitive diversity really challenge each other and can think outside the box. And when you think of cognitive diversity, you also have to think about different styles of working. So people who are more introverted versus extroverts. So I'll use myself and Dania, my co-chair, as an example. So I'm quite extroverted, but Dania is really, really introverted. So we had to work out our styles of working. But what actually worked really well for us as network chairs was we were coming at things from such different angles. Dania wouldn't always want to present things or go to team meetings. So she would come up with different forms of communication to share our information, some things that I would have never thought about. And that proved to be really, really useful. So we all have different strengths, different interests, different experiences, beliefs and backgrounds, and all of that provides us with a unique perspective. It allows us to see the world the way we see the world and come up with different insights and solutions. So with so many diverse minds coming and working together, more solutions arise and individuals bring their personal ways of operating, problem solving, decision making. And this is what really makes a company work well and is really powerful for a company, when all of these people come together to kind of brainstorm new ideas and new campaigns.
That's brilliant, and I think also it kind of touches upon some of the, we've got a few more questions in, but it touches upon some of the questions which have been asked so far, which are talking about, you know, gender and ethnic diversity, when actually it's really interesting to think about it from a different perspective as well. So I just want to ask the last couple of questions. Do you offer training for specific jobs while working, as well as the scientific background of cancer, if you haven't studied or gone to uni as a route into the charity? So yeah, we touched on this lightly last week, but maybe we could go into some of those other options which are non-graduate routes into cancer research. There are a few, aren't there?
Yeah, there are. So we have apprenticeships. So I know we definitely have a finance apprenticeship and a business apprenticeship in our technology department. So those are specifically for people who haven't gone to university and you work and build your qualification whilst you're working. So that's a really exciting thing to do. I know a couple of apprentices actually who were on the BAME network, and they said they really, really enjoyed it. University wasn't for them. They wanted to do hands-on learning, and this has worked really well for them. There's a number of skills you develop working in the working world that you don't naturally develop at university. And it's about navigating people and navigating business, and they've really developed and honed in on those skills. So we definitely have those. We also offer entry level jobs. So a number of our jobs, you don't need to go to university, and you will build up your skills as you're working on the job. Caroline, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I guess general. I think the fact that both Maheen and I have mentioned that we went to university is quite a good example of why it's important to have kind of diversity, because perhaps your perception is that you need a degree to work at CRUK, and it's just certainly not the case. So I would like to really emphasize that we just both happen to have them. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of routes into the organisation that don't require a degree, and that's the same for many organisations. And I'd encourage you to look closely at job profiles, and kind of really have a look and have the confidence in yourself that you probably do have a lot of the skills that they're requesting, and not to kind of talk yourself out of things. So yeah, there's lots of routes, whether that's kind of entry-level routes, as Maheen's mentioned. We've also got the intern programme, but yeah, our apprenticeship scheme's growing. We've got some in HR as well, and in our retail sector. So yeah, certainly don't need a degree.
That's brilliant. And also, just to reiterate on that, is any kind of vacancies and availabilities, you can definitely listen back to our webinar last week, which was about different routes into the organisation. So I'll tell you how to ask for that in a second. But also, we do work really closely with cancer research. So as those kind of opportunities come up, then because you are on the webinar today and you are one of our Pathway CTM network, then don't worry, rest assured, we'll let you know when those kind of vacancies and things are available and what's available. We can help support you there. So brilliant question. So just in light of time, I want to firstly kind of just thank you so much for your time today to our two panelists. It's been really, really, really interesting understanding the importance and complexity actually of diversity and how important it is for different organisations, particularly cancer research. Thank you so much for the students who've dialed in the first day back from Easter and on your Easter holidays. That's amazing. And I think the questions, I definitely feel like, have been brilliant today, and the engagement has been brilliant. So well done. And I would really encourage you to join the same session next week. What we're going to do is we're going to send out a type form literally straight after this presentation and webinar today, just talking about the session. And if you are interested in any kind of follow-ups in light of today, then there are a number of different ways you can go about that. So we'll send you through a survey, every single person that's been on the webinar, just to find out any feedback or anything else, any other support you need from us. But equally, any questions you have, do email them into the student at pathwayctm.com. We just ask that you write the fact that you're on this webinar and your name, just so we can answer any questions you might have after the session today. And also, I would encourage you to follow us on Instagram, just because then we can update you in terms of all of the sessions that are going ahead. For example, next Tuesday, when we have our session with cancer research again next week. Brilliant session, and really impressed by all of the engagement, and really hope that you found it useful. If you want to listen to it back, then we'll be sharing the recording of the session with everyone who is here as well, and all of those who might not have been able to make it for one reason or another. So thank you so much for today, and hope you have a lovely rest of the afternoon, and particularly thank you to our panelists.
Oh, thanks ever so much for having us. Yeah, really enjoyed it, and best of luck, everyone. Nice to kind of meet you all.
Yeah, likewise, and thanks so much for your great questions.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
kept us on our toes. Thank you.
Thank you.